I love Japan. I love TA people. I love agency people. But I think the way that the majority of TA and RPOs are set up in Japan, I think we've highlighted and we've got a theme here that, a lot of them and the majority of them are quite transactional and they're managing process. Now, I'd be really worried about being in a role where I'm managing process. I'm a gatekeeper or a weather vane of opinion or transaction. I'd be very worried about that because we know AI, we're on the first wave of that, but that's already taking that away.
Welcome to the Focus Core podcast, where we dive deep into leadership, talent, and the evolving world of business in Japan to help you focus on your core business. Today, I am very happy to welcome Matt Best, who is a global talent acquisition leader with over 25 years of experience across agency, executive search, RPO, and transformation roles. He believes talent acquisition is not an admin function, but a core business discipline closer to the go-to market sales than HR, because hiring decisions directly shape revenue, opportunity, and growth. He's originally from North England, based in Japan on and off since early 2000. Matt began his career in London before moving to Tokyo, where we met up in the early 2000s. I think it was 2001, Matt. Oh. Yeah, and we built high-performing, where he built high-performing recruitment teams, but we also built one too, serving firms such as Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. Matt then moved in-house at Morgan Stanley, scaling technology, hiring across Japan and Asia. He then moved over to RBS and was recruiting across 11 countries from Australia to India before helping design a trailblazing internal executive search function for Corning Inc. across APAC. He later then had that rolled out into the US. And then in 2014, Matt founded Best Practices to help organizations run talent acquisition as a revenue-enabling function, which will be great for us to talk about. Now back in Japan, Matt advises on retained executive search and project-based talent acquisition as a service, which we call TaaS, with projects ranging from fintech scale-ups to APAC market entry and post-acquisition C-suite builds. And he is also a father of three, which is his most complex operating model to date. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.
It's brilliant to be talking to you. As we mentioned before we turned on the mic,
it's been too long. Yeah, it's been far too long.
We're two Wall Street alumni from 2001 when they set up in Tokyo.
Yeah, I think they actually set up in 2000. So I went through a couple of iterations before you guys came in. And unfortunately, at that point, I'd gone through kind of three changes of direction. So I'm not the typical alumni that built a career there. I'm alumni that then flipped and went to Robert Walters and built a career there, unfortunately. But
that's great. Well, it's nice to sit down and chat with you. So you built, TA functions in, like I said, agencies and hybrids. Let's get right into it. What's one of the problems that keeps repeating that push you towards making TaaS, which is just talent as a as a service?
That's a good question. So currently I run a hybrid model. So our service offering covers both executive search, but more interestingly enough, it's moving towards the TaaS model, and we're having more conversations around the TaaS business. And as you describe it, that's talent acquisition as a service. So to describe that, that's a temporary internal headhunting solution that would act like an internal agency, act like a turbocharged talent acquisition team sitting on the client side or working remotely on specific hires that need to be across the line. So I'm currently working in that space. But based on your question, what are some of the problems that I see? I think, I've thought about this question quite a lot, and I think the reason I'm looking at TaaS as a model is really to try and avoid what we see across both agency and talent acquisition, and it's what I would describe as almost the master and servant complex. So if you think on an agency side, you're going after clients. There's certain clients that you have a very deep relationship with, and you can really push the envelope and put a mirror onto that client and say, look, I'm advising you in a deep way that you shouldn't do this. You should pay more. You need to fix your recruiting process. You need to change the fact that you're looking for certain ages. But there's only a small selection of clients that you can really get that deep dive with. You know, I've felt on the agency side that I really want to push that, and all of a sudden they recall into, hey, we're the client, you're the hired help. So what I call that is the kind of master and server complex. And then in TA, and typically in Japan, that is how the team is set up. It's really the master is the hiring manager. Habits be damned, you know, bad habits be damned, inelegant processes, unusual practices. TA has to deal with that. And they're really just taking orders. So I call those teams, and you've probably seen me on LinkedIn mention it. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but I call those teams kind of Mac talent. So it's like, can we take your order? Welcome to talent acquisition. And they're setting themselves up to fail because they're seen as an admin function. They have to kowtow to the business. And that's not to say, you know, rob the business up the wrong way. But from my approach to talent acquisition is really having a deep business conversation with the business. Then we can get onto recruitment. Then we can get onto solutioning. Then we can talk about what we can do ourselves, what needs to go out to agencies, what needs to go out to RPOs. So I've built talent acquisition as a service and best practice with a view to dropping that service into clients, that it's one part headhunter, it's one part business analyst, it's one part psychologist. It's going to tell you where you're going wrong because you're paying me to do that, to give you advisory help. So there's a big advisory piece that's wrapped into that, and that's key for me. So whenever I've been on the agency side, I have 2 or 3 clients that I consider friends. You know, we're on WhatsApp, and I can tell them where they're going wrong. And I can really put a mirror on them, and they'll go, "Oh, okay, thanks for that, man." But the majority of clients that I work with, if I push in that way, they'll recall. And it's like, hey, hang up, you're on a retainer, you do what we say. Yeah. And TA is the same. So I would say to avoid that master and servant complex of, you know, you're serving the business. You're not advising. You're not consulting with the business. And sometimes that means telling them where they're going wrong.
Great.
So that's why I've developed that to be able to come in and give that advisory and delivery help to clients.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I always see that as, you know, companies want to save money on their talent acquisition, so they think, okay, let's hire a smart recruiter, bring them in, and they'll be our talent acquisition team. But they keep the bad habits, and or your best recruiters tend not to go in-house anyway, or they don't know how to run operational rollout systems.
Absolutely.
And so it's always this kind of chicken and egg. You know, how do you know, the client wants it, but then you hired someone who's not able to do it, or you hire someone who's able to do it, and the bad habits are already in the client. And so what I loved when you started talking about, you know, TaaS is that, okay, let's take the third option. Let's hire someone that already knows how to do it, drop them in, and do this project, and let's learn some best practices, right?
Yeah. No, you got that perfectly. So that TaaS comes in, works on a project base, works in a strategic level, will tell local management if they're going wrong, will tell global management what they need to do to bridge the gap between the 2 parties. Or what we often find with talent acquisition people as they go into roles fresh from agencies, they're hardwired to say yes to the client. All they've done is BD and yes. Maybe they'll push the envelope if the comp isn't right and things like that. But they're very short in that kind of strategic, consultative solution selling. So they can't say, okay, we can't do X, but we can do Y and Z, and this is the reason why. And you only really get that kind of experience and those battle scars through being in very structured, messy, global matrix TA and being able to fight both corners and bridge the gap. So when I originally went into Morgan Stanley, I had 2 discussions. So I had a discussion with the business, and they said, we want you to be a bridge between HR and us. and we want you to make us a better recruiter. So they gave me a mandate. I was quite lucky in that regard that my first role in TA was to go in and fix something. But then when I had the interview with HR, they were like, yeah, oh, we don't want you to be a rope in a tug of war. So HR's perspective was, okay, it's a battle. We're going to have a rope. You're going to be the rope, and we're going to be pulling you, and they're going to be pulling you. And the business was like, we want you to be a bridge into HR. We want you to be on our payroll. You'll be a business manager within IT, but we want you to sit in HR and tell them where they need to hustle, where they need to improve. And you need to tell us where we need to improve as well. So I was kind of lucky in that regard that I was given my first TA role was quite an exciting role. I went from an agency and I was told, you have a mandate to tell us if we're being, rubbish at recruiting, or if HR are dragging the feet, or if you as a recruiter see a bottleneck, tell us because we want to fix it. So they gave me that mandate, and that I've taken that into every TA role I've gone into, that I've made sure that I have that syndication or from senior management at a very senior level, because I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to ask people to change, to fix things. So that's really important for me as well. So again, as a TaaS, I can bring that to the table, where if you hire somebody that's coming from one of the contingent agencies and they're just tired because they're not billing, and then they drop into TA, and then they don't realize that it's actually a sales role. It's an internal sales role of keeping the local stakeholders happy, keeping global happy, who probably have a different idea around what you should be doing and could be doing, and finding a happy medium between the two. Finding a localization that works for the local business, but then shifting the dial in terms of what global might want to do. And typically global want to do direct sourcing. They look at the fees and say, we're going to hire a TA person. That's going to take all our fees away. We're going to get somebody into direct source because that's how it works in New York, London, Canada, Australia. Elsewhere, it doesn't work like that here. And the mere fact that they're going for an agent who is maybe a little bit frazzled from being in a sales role and sees TA, because they've interacted with a lot of TA people as a gatekeeper, a police person, a governor of process. When you actually drop in there, you have to have those hard conversations, both locally and globally, about what might and might not work. And I think a TaaS option where you have experienced headhunters and TA people kind of bridges that gap, because we've been there, done that, seen that, had those conversations. So that's what's interesting on that side.
So there's a lot to unpack there, but there's an obvious question that I think listeners would have is, okay, I get it. It seems like a good bring someone in for a project, but what's the difference between that and RPO? Why wouldn't I just bring in an RPO to do this hiring?
Right. Yeah. Because, looking at the large RPOs, they're not set up to have that strategic outlook. I have pushed this to agencies in terms of a model that they should try and adopt. But I think if you look at the traditional RPO, they're global RPO agreements, so they bring in their usual vendor, whoever it may be. Typically I call these the blue logo agencies, so we all can understand the blue logo. Most of the global companies have that, whether it's, Randstad, Hayes, Robert Walters, they're all a blue logo. So they'll bring these companies in, and really they're hiring hands. They're not hiring expertise. They're hiring somebody to work in the process. So I think if you're using a large RPO, you're driven by global in terms of, okay, we just want recruitment to go away. It's a hot potato for us in Japan. So let's get more headcount to these traditional RPOs. And these RPOs, again, are mainly, no disrespect to them, mainly stocked with junior consultants that perhaps haven't worked on the desks, so they've moved over into a more RPO role. And they're managing process. They're pointing and clicking. They're not having a conversation with the business. If they are, it goes back into that master and servant dynamic, that they are a hired help. And a TaaS is a hired help, but we set out from the start that we're a hired help, but we may ruffle feathers. We may come in and say, look, this is broken. We may say we can't help you through the first conversation we have with you. Where an RPO will say, yeah, we'll build you a solution. And, we'll give you an ATS, we'll give you the dashboards to tell you how we're not working or how we're working, or, they build the dashboards for the client. And that typically is the model. So it's an extra pair of hands. So it's almost like hack-end business. You're hiring a junior recruiter to come in and be a cog in the machine. And that's not what we do. And that's, if that's what a client wants, I would run a million miles away from that conversation if that's what they wanted. So in terms of how TaaS is different is, yes, we can manage that process. We can bring in an administrator, and we typically do bring in a junior person to help with some of that administration. But it's really about building capability to go direct and headhunt that talent directly, and build in talent intelligence and build in pipelining for future hiring. And of course, then we charge a fee for that. And that is completely different flavor of solution to an RPO business.
Yeah, I mean, that's in my mind, that's ideally what you would expect with an RPO, right? Is that they come in and build out processes, train up management, and really they're just sticking another Band-Aid on the wound.
That's it. They just see the headcount, they see the number of recs, they see time to fire, time to hire. Maybe it is time to fire for some of these guys, but that's why we're here. But time to hire going through the roof, agency costs going through the roof, and then you bring in somebody who was an agent, maybe didn't work out, maybe they have aspirations to be in HR, and you drop them in, and what can they do? Can they headhunt? Can they tell the business that you shouldn't be looking for people under 40? You should be broadening your scope. Should they argue that having 9 interviews for an associate role is completely obtuse and you should streamline it to 3 and try and do it all in 2 weeks? They haven't got that skill set. They haven't got that ability. And, over time, they will build that ability. And, this isn't a TA or an RPO bashing exercise from my side. There's some very experienced TA people that get it. There's some very experienced RPO, but in the main, the majority of the people at a desk level are just there in terms of pushing people through the process, having conversations. So we don't do that. That's not what we do. So.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to highlight is that, RPO is a good solution for certain problems in certain companies, and sometimes having that junior person in there is fine too. It's not, that's there. I mean, I have a problem with big scale contingency firms that they're so transactional, but some companies need that. That's what they need. Is they don't need any extras. They just need the resumes through the door. They don't need they don't need the advice that we could give them, right?
Absolutely. And I think if you're a big brand, an RPO, you advertise and everybody applies to your roles, and you're across all the channels in Japan, and you have numerous hits to your own careers website, then RPO is going to work for you, I would say. Yeah.
I got a trick question, and I know you'll straighten me out on it.
Go ahead.
Is TaaS more about cost, speed, or quality, or is that the wrong question? And I have a feeling you'll tell me it's the wrong question.
Yeah, it may be the wrong question. I mean, it's a slightly different service. It's not about cost, but of course we play on the cost to be able to get a foot in the door. Or in terms of conversations, typically our conversations start with executive search, and then we work on a couple of projects, and those projects then develop into, okay, we need to hire 8 people into this team. Rather than charging that client once we've made a couple of executive search placements into that client, we will then say, okay, well, we can do it almost like a container retainer around those 8 hires, and we'll do it at a slightly different level, but we'll give you the same service that you have with executive search. So it's not really about time. It's just looking at it in a different way and asking the client, do you really want to own this talent agenda around this team build or this project? And it's saying, you have somebody dedicated who is one part headhunter, one part business analyst, one part, closer, who can really kind of drive that for you. And then once we've driven that for you and got that successful, we can then step away. So we're a temporary project-based resource. So most of our projects go anywhere between 3 to 6 months. They don't go much beyond that, which goes back to the RPO model. They want to be in for life.
Okay.
For us, we haven't been successful if we're still there after 6 months, because we come in to do a specific job, focus on a specific area in the business. So it may be a post-merger integration project where a company has acquired a company in Japan and they want to build a level above the local management, because all of a sudden now they have to have conversations with overseas. Now they have to, from a finance perspective, have to do international standards on reporting. FP&A now gets really important because they're an acquisition. And a lot of these local companies don't have that level of sophistication. So we can come in and build out that finance team, IT team, operations team, heads of, and then walk away. And then equally, we can work with a software company that's, we've just signed an agreement with a major tech vendor in Japan. We need 14 people by August or September. Can you come in and build that? So we can wrap a solution around that. But I think key for us is we haven't been successful if we're still on site. We're not looking to be. We will come in and do other projects. We're not looking for that longevity and that extending of the contracts. We're there to hire a particular set of staff or to answer a particular question and then go away. So much like a lawyer may come in and look at a particular project, or bringing in tax accountants to work on a particular project, or management consultants. So we position ourselves like that, but we will work on junior mid-level stuff if there's enough volume there, and then equally we'll work on changing the C-suite for a company. And that particular example, we were actually brought in to bring in a head of HR and a finance on a retainer, and we did such a good job on that off the basis of that, we got all of the other C-suite, and then we got all of the second in command as a TaaS contained project. Of course, if we ran that as a retainer, we would have got a lot more fee, but we kind of showed that goodwill that, okay, we've shown what we can do. If you bring us in deeper, let us own it. Don't advertise, don't go out to other agencies. We will do that. And obviously there's a cost say to that, but then we get the exclusivity, we get the retainer, and then we get the success-based fee, which is a lower percentage than a normal executive search fee as well.
So what I'm hearing is that I would want to call you up if I'm probably a larger company that has some hiring issue where I want to hire either an executive or multiple hires. And I don't want to go out to contingency. I don't want to use multiple agencies.
Yeah.
I think that a retained fee might not be the right fit because it's too expensive, or maybe it's not the service I need. But what I really need is, I have a problem internally for processes as well that I need to fix, and that you'll come in and help that while being able to bring in multiple people senior people for me. Am I hearing that?
That's an area that obviously interests us, and one of our first projects was actually with that focus of coming in as an executive search consultant, but then selling the fact that we can do TA. And what we're trying to do there as well is, with this company, it's a large company, but they made an acquisition into Japan. So they needed to change the DNA at a senior C-suite level. So we started with 2 retainers. And then based on that, once we had those 2 people on board, they then said, well, actually our second in commands need to change. So if we're now going to do FP&A, we're now going to be reporting overseas. I need help with that because we have a local Nikkei style business that doesn't understand that. We don't want to upset those staff. We want to bring them up to speed. But I need to hire number 2s now. So that gave us the opportunity to go in and really get the other 2 C-suite positions and then the deputies in that. So that would be the ideal scenario. But then equally, we're working with a software company at the moment, or we're in discussions with a software company, which is the other example where they've just signed an agreement. They don't have a big brand name here. The partner that they're working with does have a big brand name, and they want to hire 7 types of one IT engineer and then 7 types of another project manager, and they need a leader for that team, and they need it by August because that's when they're going to start doing the work. So that is smaller, more contingent roles. They're not huge. They're probably about 10, 12 mil roles. But we go in and say, we'll take all of that. We'll take all of that. Obviously, we research the market. We look into our database. We're not going to entertain engaging with an agent if we don't think we could deliver on that. But we think we can deliver. And the reason, we look at the market research, we look at the talent, and we think, okay, yeah, we can do this. So we'll wrap a solution around that. So that's not C-suite. So we're kind of fishing in the middle, and we will go after kind of C-suite executive search and then sow that seed of, it's not a cost thing. It's just, I've done a great job. Just give me all of your executive stuff, executive roles going forward. And if you're worried about that costing a lot of money, then we can meet you halfway.
Good.
So that's kind of what we do.
Let's shift gears a little bit. I got a couple of different questions around, since I have you and you have such an awesome background and experience globally, let's talk about a couple of easy ones. So people talk about hiring in Japan versus hiring elsewhere in the world. For you, what do you see as the big differences compared to what you've seen in Asia, Africa, the rest of the world that you've worked in?
Yeah, I mean, we all know this market is all about building trust with candidates. The channels are completely different. We're brought in to do TaaS projects generally from global heads of TA who have a headache about Japan, don't understand Japan. They understand the kind of sound bites that LinkedIn is not well regarded or well picked up by Japanese talent, and that's correct. But in terms of the difference between the markets, if I was to use the examples of, say, for example, Dubai and Japan, Dubai has its own nuances. You advertise a role and you get 500 resumes a day on average because everybody wants to work in Dubai. So if you haven't got a sophisticated ATS system that's sifting through that and saying this guy is not in the UAE, has no experience, then you've got your talent acquisition team sat on 500 resumes a day. And that's a complete kind of nightmare. And that's something that I fixed in the UAE. With that solution, I looked at, okay, let's not advertise roles. If you're looking after compliance as a TA manager, you're looking after operations and IT, everybody is in the same office space. So it's called the DIFC, so HSBC, they're all in this huge commercial kind of, it's almost like a shopping mall, but it's with offices if you've ever been to Dubai. So you can go and have coffee and go and meet with these people. So my role at Standard Chartered in Dubai was to really use the force, drop the advertising. These guys are drowning in 500 resumes. They're carrying 30 recs. Go out and have 10 conversations with heads of compliance at competitors. See what they're talking about. Bring that back to the business. In terms of Japan's different. You advertise, you get no CVs. I sometimes put jobs out on LinkedIn more as a branding exercise to say, yeah, I'm still alive, I'm here, I'm active. Yep. But I don't hope for a Hail Mary that I'm going to get any kind of quality through that. So in Japan, it's completely different. You have to have a different approach. And a lot of my conversations with talent acquisition managers in a global level is focused on, hey, we tried this from the UK or the US and we went in there slinging job specs, speaking English on LinkedIn. And I was like, well, you wonder why you didn't have any kind of response. I mean, first it's in English. I mean, these guys can speak English typically on LinkedIn, but you've come in from overseas, you're an unknown brand. It's just mendoxide to reply back to you. You're slinging a job spec rather than asking about them. So a lot of my roles, or all my roles in TA, has been around getting that TA manager to stop slinging job specs, and even on the agency side, and assume a persona that you would be an interesting person to at least have a conversation with, or at least reply back. As an insurance folk, you might not be looking now, you're going to be looking in the future, and I'm slightly different and slightly softer. So that's the approach in Japan, that you have to get out, you have to meet people, you have to be a softer approach. And I think what companies get wrong, specifically when they look from overseas, is they try and use a cookie cutter approach, or this worked perfectly in London and New York. Let's just drop it in, spec everybody senseless, and then they realize, oh, we're not getting any replies. But people are on LinkedIn. But if you had a different approach, if you actually were sat in Japan and could be, hey, do you want to meet for a coffee? Hey, can we do a Zoom call on my time? Hey, could we maybe start in Japanese and switch to English? You get a better response. So I think there's cultural nuances in each country. And I worked from Australia all the way up to India, did all of the Middle East, recruited in the UK, done some work in the UK, in the US. Every market has its own cultural nuance. And I think what global TA or global leaders get wrong is they feel that they can harmonize their operations, and what works in one jurisdiction will work in another. And in Japan, that completely flips the script on that kind of approach.
That's great. So let me ask my second question, which is because I think a lot of our listeners are SMEs. What do you see as the different approach now for an SME versus enterprise?
There shouldn't be any different, really. So I know you wanted to ask a question around my experience. What did banking teach me that a startup couldn't? And I actually wanted to flip that question, and I would flip it with enterprise and SMEs as well. Depending on the hiring volume within an SME, if you're looking at scaling up, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a sophisticated recruiting solution, be it a headhunting team or a TaaS solution coming in to help you with that scale. So I've worked in a startup environment where the client was very receptive to bringing myself in really early, before they had a head of HR, before they had any kind of people operations, because talent is really important in terms of small, mid-sized companies. If they're looking to scale, I would add that proviso that if they're SMEs and they're happy in terms of their world and their market share, and they have no aspirations to build beyond that, then a talent acquisition as a service solution probably wouldn't work for them. But I think your original question was around what did banking teach me? Banking TA teach me that startup never could. And I wanted to actually flip that in terms of, banking taught me how to operate in a very high octane, aggressive environment where personalities didn't suffer fools gladly, where you had to be completely on your A game and be completely sure about what you did. But then conversely, when they look at recruitment, they have a large amount of money and they just throw money at it. So that's like, okay, let's go to search, let's go to agency. And that's great for us as search or agency owners. That's fantastic. But then they also have very obtuse and long drawn out interview processes. They tend to come in very low in terms of fees and things like that. So it's not all kind of milk and honey with banks. But that taught me about personalities and that kind of hustle and approach, and being very, very strong in terms of meeting difficult personalities and being able to manage that and control that and stakeholder management. What startup taught me is you don't have any of that. You don't have a brand name. You don't have a system. You have an idea. You maybe have a product, and that's it. You don't have any of that. You don't have a budget. So RBS, when I was in Asia, I was managing a recruitment budget of $4 million US. That's how much we spent on recruiting solutions, LinkedIn, agency in a year within the equities business across 11 countries. When I came into a startup, I had to encourage them to pay me what I wanted to be paid to come in and solve their problem. And then that was it. Everything else I had to hustle and build myself. So between those two, and that's the original question that I wanted to answer, because between those two, I would say that, working in a bank is almost like traveling in business class, on a large jumbo jet, where, working in a startup, you're actually working in the garage and building your own glider, and you're actually mixing your own fiberglass to be able to do that. So in answer to the SME question, I would say if you have a desire to scale and you have a desire to get from S to M, and you have a desire to be number one in your particular area and you have a large number of hires, then there's no reason why you couldn't look at a tactical RPO solution like ourselves. But it would be dependent on that scale. And I would advise, certainly with startups, that the first, I don't like to call TA HR, but the first people person that you bring a founding TA leader in to help. And they will hire directly. They will build relationships with agencies for roles that they know they can't fill. If the volume's too high, they can bring in partners and things like that. But the last thing you want is a head of HR when you've got 5 people, a great idea and a product, and you want to scale from 5 to 20 to 50 to 300. Once you get to 50, then you probably need a HR manager and a HR team. But in those embryonic days, you need a talent acquisition manager, but you need somebody, like myself or somebody similar that can come in.
So we're early days yet. We don't need we're not going to go in and we're thinking we're going to get a TA. What should a company look at when they're hiring a TA, do you think?
What type of company? I mean, it depends. Is it a startup company or an enterprise company? I mean, they're going to be slightly different.
That's a great question. If we're looking at, if we're a typical company nowadays, 100-person company, and you feel like, okay, we need a TA person. I mean, in general, when we're looking at a TA person, what are some qualities you look for a decent TA versus when some of these companies that we both know that have hired TAs shake their head and go, oh, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing I check when I've been hiring into TA teams, and I've mentioned it in obviously my LinkedIn profile, and I know you rolled it out in one of the questions, but I look for a courage to think differently, to not, and by that I mean somebody who's super inquisitive about the business, probably not going to have a recruiting conversation first and foremost, wants to align with the business. So this again is why I see TA not as a HR function per se, but more as a business management function. Somebody that can have a business conversation with a business leader first and foremost before getting into, okay, this is how we will approach recruiting. That's where the magic happens. And I think a lot of TAs are afraid to go in, sit down with a CEO or a CEO and go, okay, what's keeping you awake at night? What's your plans for next year? Wouldn't it be great if we had workforce planning, because we could cut time to hire from 120 days to 0 days if you told me about all the conversations you had before it became a live requirement. If you got TA in there, time to hire becomes, a moot KPI. It's a KPI that they love to use at these more transactional and operational TA teams, because they're measuring how good or how bad they are. 90 days, 120 days. Okay, 120 days, we now go out to an agency and we bring them in. And now the agency is expected to feel like a partner, and they've not really done anything. But in a more strategic TA team, when I've interviewed for TA roles that I've been successful in acquiring or been unsuccessful, the question I always ask of the senior TA leader or the HR of the business is, do you have a culture of workforce planning? And then typically they don't have that, or it's quite fudgy. I think that is really important for strategic TA. So in answer to your question, I would look for somebody who is inquisitive about the business, is passionate about the business, can then take that conversation and look at some kind of solution building. And again, it doesn't have to be all direct sourcing. Some of this will go out to agencies, some of it will go out to search. But having that conversation with the business and understanding, okay, what's the low hanging fruit, or what's the quick wins or the mid wins that I can get? So an example I would use would be RBS. We used agencies for everything, but then we saw within equity research, we saw 35% churn. And, somebody would come in, spend 2 years, be number 2 writer on telecoms and media, and then want to be number 1, so would make that jump. And we were using agencies all the time. Now, these people are all over LinkedIn. They're advertising the fact that, I write for RBS, I'm out with Bloomberg having a presentation. These people are all over LinkedIn. So we actually noticed that, yeah, we should go out to search for traders. We should go out for the stuff that we don't know these people, or the business know this people, but they don't want us to be caught talking to them. So let's bring in the search firm. But this area where we had 35% churn in a big business area, so equity riders riding on products and markets, we can find them on LinkedIn. So let's build that pool. So I've been looking for somebody that can solution sell like that. And I see TA as not taking away from the agencies or search firms. They have a part to play, and they have a big part to play. And I'm actually big on bringing search firms in a lot deeper than they would normally do a client, because I understand what they need to be able to do their job, and they need that feedback, they need that understanding, they need that direct line contact with the hiring manager. So I'm never going to police that as a TA person when I'm on a site. But I will look for areas where I'm like, hang on, we could do this ourselves. We got 35% churn. Everybody's all over LinkedIn. If we just approach these people directly, build a pool, build a community of writers, we can affect that. We can reduce costs. So I've been looking for somebody that kind of thinks like that. And there's maybe not a lot of people out there, but I think for a more junior person, I want them to be inquisitive about the business, and I want them to show examples of where they've pushed back, but rather than pushing back and being obtuse, they've pushed back and provided a solution that's been accepted or being thought about. But for me, TA is all about solution selling. So it goes back to that, hey, we can't do X, but let's look at Y and Z. And I think in Japan, what global here is, they hear a lot of, we can't do X, we can't do X, we can't do X. And they don't hear anything else. So I've been looking for that.
I like that. I know you got so many, employer branding is such a buzzword now. It's nice. I think employer branding's great, but like you said, if a TA should be going in and saying, okay, this part of the business we need is 60% of our hiring is this. We're going to own that. We'll outsource the rest of it.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
60%. That's where your employee branding needs to be. So if you're a big four and you're bringing in, low-level accountants, then you own that, and everything should be around accounting. Or if you're doing sales and you need salespeople, it's all around sales and the success stories, and it just helps the marketing aspect of the TA. It's a huge thing that I think companies miss. They just kind of say, okay, let's do employer branding, and it's about putting our name brand out into the world, and maybe some success stories of employees, but it's not directed to helping the team much, right? The TA team.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
I think that's great. And I wish there was a magic wand where we could get companies to say, let's just pick a portion. I have a man of mine who's doing recruitment. He had, he was doing 60 recs a year for his company. I think he did 58 of them, and he outsourced 2 of them. I think one was HR because he just ended. But then their direct competitor has 60 recs open. They have a team of 4 to 5 TAs. And what they do is they get the rec from the hiring manager and go directly to agency. And it drives me nuts. I'm as an agency, great, let's give the work out there, but why don't you build up? Because then you're meeting other agents, you're fielding resumes that you don't need. There's a lot of extra busy work. And then you're paying the fee on top of it, which is exorbitant in Japan, right?
And typically that model, they go out to a lot of agencies. So then you're having a lot of conversations with lots of agencies. And then you know how it feels on the agency side. If you're one of 9 vendors on a panel working for one role, you just walk away from that.
I was going to say,
you're not going to get involved with that. I've worked on some exclusive stuff where there isn't a retainer attached, but I look for exclusivity and some written confirmation that there's exclusivity on that. But you're not going to get the talent that you need going into that type of market.
So let's look forward a bit. What's looking into your crystal ball? What's TA going to look like in 3 to 5 years, and who's already obsolete? That's my favorite.
This is a good question. I think we're already there. So I guess if we, I have I love Japan. I love TA people. I love agency people. But I think, the way that the majority of TA and RPOs are set up in Japan, I think we've highlighted and we've got a theme here that, a lot of them and the majority of them are quite transactional and they're managing process. Now, I'd be really worried about being in a role where I'm managing process. I'm a gatekeeper or a weather vane of opinion or transaction. I'd be very worried about that because we know AI, we're on the first wave of that, but that's already taking that away.
Yeah, thank goodness.
And operational managers are looking at that and saying, interview setups, screening resume going into a bucket and being sent by another agent, and some communication needed and some refereeing of that process needing to be done. Interview feedback from the hiring manager. This can all be automated. I mean, the pure fact that it's purely transactional opens it up to be dust, if not within this year, within a couple of years, I would say, once the HR tech gets adopted. I think the proviso on that is HR is often, I've worked in HR, I've worked in TA. HR is often the last in the food chain to get the sexy tech. So they're typically working with old tech. So that kind of gives these teams a little bit of a breathing space, I think. I think most of them will run with the current ATS, but I think it will drip in terms of, okay, now you don't do interview setup. Now we're automating interview feedback across all the stages and we're getting a whole view. And then the AI is telling us who's the ideal candidate from that competency testing. I think that's going to happen pretty quickly. And at the moment, TA is running around maybe with a virtual piece of paper going, okay, A, B, C. I think that's going to, outside of Japan, that's dust, if not now, in the next year. And we're already seeing people going out of jobs, TA teams being reduced by 60%. And I think in Japan, it will move slower. Local will want to hold on to a local face that they, can bring into their camp, when it gets a little bit heated and they want somebody to fight their corner. But I think the process part is going to be gone if it's not gone already. It's in the post. It's not all doom and gloom. I think the positive of that is anybody that's working in that environment, it doesn't have to be in Japan, that understands process, that can get under the hood of a large system like recruiting from front to back to onboarding, to appraisal, to promotion. Anybody that can get into that workflow and has a systems mindset or wants to retrain will probably do pretty well, because I think what you will have now is you'll have teams looking at, okay, do we need to hire somebody or do we need to build something for this particular problem or solution or this need in the company? And I think somebody that can look at that as the systems analyst and look at kind of best of breed solutioning, whether that would come from TA, is going to do pretty well in the future with a view to TA. I think what we'll see is TA ops will build out. So it'll be a lot of tools, a lot of systems, a lot of managing that, a lot of managing brand, a lot of managing governance around what AI can do and can't do. So I think that's going to be different. But, I like AI, but I don't think it can do the very strategic, human high-touch role that we do as recruiters and executive search and TA people. It can't have that conversation with, senior stakeholders. It can't have that value. So I think we're probably okay. We may need to adapt and fine-tune and bring in some tooling to help with what we do. But I think the kind of bread and butter TA operational people, to be honest, I think they're DOS, to be honest. You might want to cut that out, but I think it's spot on. They're managing process, and now there's a system that can manage process 24 hours a day in a much more cleaner way than they can.
And I think that's important for especially listeners in Japan, because like you said, this is you're not reading the crystal ball. This has already happened. We're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
we're just 10 years
And I
behind in
think,
Japan, right?
yeah, I think it's happening. Oh, I'm already seeing it.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I know a lot of TA people and HR people. The amount of people that, hey, I'm hanging out for a job, I'm looking for a job. And there's a reduction because a lot of that operational workload has just disappeared overnight and can be plugged into a system and an AI. And that can work 24 hours and push
Yeah.
it faster, quicker, cleaner. The only issue on that is the governance part. If you're assessing candidates using that, as we see with some of the legal cases in the US, that opens up that kind of question of should that be involved in that assessment? And that's a kind of moral question that we're going to wrestle with for next year. But I think, yeah, operational HR, operational business people in general are probably looking at their roles changing, and they
Yeah.
need to be owning that tooling rather than owning the process.
Yeah, it's interesting because you got in like like you were saying in Dubai earlier, but globally it's easier to get scrape data, for example, for AI to scrape data off the internet and get people. And
Yeah,
still in Japan, AI, there's no data to scrape. There's not
yeah,
that
yeah.
many. Privacy is so important in Japan. There's just not AI can't do that much in Japan.
No,
The
no.
and like you already alluded to, the relationships don't go anywhere in
Yeah,
Japan, right?
you have to have the relationship and the trust. I just think a Japanese person probably won't want to talk to an AI about a career change anymore than
Yeah.
they want to talk to somebody in Canada who's not speaking any kind of
Well,
English and firing job specs at. So,
and that's what the biggest thing trying to get,
mm,
global players to understand when they're coming into
yeah,
Japan. Just having that conversation is
mm,
one, the global players tend to be recruiting people off LinkedIn or people that just aren't qualified because they don't know how they fit into the Japanese uh,
yeah,
scenery. And then
mm,
two, they're not speaking to the right people because those
no,
people aren't
no.
on LinkedIn anyway.
Yeah,
So it's,
yeah. Or they're not looking to get brokered introductions or,
yeah, yeah,
any of that kind of good stuff that we can do. We can, phone a buddy and ask him or open up your Rolodex and I'm looking for this. It's really obtuse. And then, maybe somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. I mean, it's not a dark science or it's not dark magic recruiting. That's how it works in Japan. It's
yeah.
relationship building, trust building, networking. Uh, most of my TA roles have been pushing TA teams to understand that that's how it is in Dubai. That's how it is in Japan. You need to go out and network and know the market.
So before we leave, I want to highlight that really because if I had a magic wand, another magic wand,
Mm,
if I could get, if our listeners are taking nothing away
mm,
from our conversation today, I wish that they would take away that their
mm,
TA teams need to be doing TA work, which is going out, networking, building up
mm,
that brand, going out
absolutely.
and doing real what they can do locally. That is
Mm,
just
mm.
the example I gave with the person that did 60 recs by himself.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
how he can do it. He's not
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
going out and doing all the kind of
Mm,
groundbreaking work. So
absolutely.
let's leave with some positive rapid fire questions.
Right. Rapid fire questions. I've not to think about these, so I've not printed these ones out. So fire
Okay,
away.
good. I've read that you're a footy lover of Leeds. Who's the best
Uh,
Leeds player of all time? Is that true?
Oh, that's a good. Yeah, I love Leeds United. I used to own a season ticket before I came out. Whenever I go back, I try and coincide that with being able to grab at least two games when I go back. I've yet to take my boy to the game, so I'm
Ah,
looking forward to that. So yeah, I'm a diehard Leeds fan. It's a difficult question, so I'm going to say Ao Tanaka. Not because he's the greatest, but he's someone that makes me very excited as somebody living in Japan. So we have somebody from the Japanese national team. I could actually go over here and pull his shirt out and show that I've got a shirt with his name on.
nice.
But yeah, that Ao Tanaka for me because he's Nihonjin doing well, living in Leeds, and that's great. And it gives aspiration to my boy that you're not watching a football team, like Man City. You're actually watching Leeds, and there's a Japanese player playing for them. So
Cool.
okay.
New Order, Blue Monday or Bizarre Love Triangle?
Bizarre love triangle for me. I've heard Blue Monday too many times. I love it, but I think the band would probably answer in the same
I think
fashion
so
as
too.
well. Yeah.
We're
Okay.
Best 1980s album that you still play too loud.
Pixies, Doolittle.
Nice. Okay.
Absolutely amazing band. David Bowie's favorite band, apparently. But yeah, I still play it. It still stands up. And I was torn between that and Surfer Rosa, but I think, yeah, Gouge Away is just an
Ooh.
amazing 3-minute punk song. But
Yeah.
there we go.
Good choice. I like that. One
Mm.
song that instantly puts you back in your youth.
Oh, electronic, Getting Away with It All My Life.
Don't know that one. I'm gonna have
Uh,
to go look that one up.
you can
Nice.
get it. It's got a good kind of call to action on that one.
Cool. Japan, convenience store food or proper izakaya?
Oh, I'm too busy. Convenience food. And I'd love to do izakaya every day.
Most Japan moment that's you have that still makes you laugh.
uh, I'm kind of immune to this, so I don't want to answer this. I've kind
Okay.
of got to a point where I've assimilated fully, but yeah, maybe take that one offline.
One British habit that you'll never lose in Japan.
Sarcasm.
Brilliant answer. Never expected that from you. And last but
Right.
not least, tea or coffee?
Uh, Coffee, but I'm drinking tea at the moment. I drink both, but yeah, coffee
Nice.
for me.
Well, Bestie, it's been nice to chat with you. We'll have links to your company, to LinkedIn, and everything on the show notes. So please reach out to Matt if your team's looking to do some hiring. And it's been great catching up. It's just been too long,
We
and
should do
I've
this
really
again.
enjoyed that.
Maybe not online. Yeah,
Yeah.
we should do it. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
I'm doing the uptown low down, yeah.